So we're here in Wyoming, in Hulett, near Devils Tower, which you can see over my shoulder. You can also hear gunshots ringing because there's a shooting range down the way, but we're putting up with it because you're not going to get a better view of the tower behind here. For me, Close Encounters might have been the largest inspiration for me getting involved with this field because I was a kid when that movie came out, and I was so fascinated just by the aspect of potential serious investigation of UFOs and that first moment if there were to be an alien civilization to land here and to interact with us. I really kind of forgot about it. I got involved with math and science, and then later on when I got involved with this field, I only liked the movie more because I learned how it very much represents and portrays actual UFO cases or events that people have reported. And of course, I've become a big fan of Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who inspired Spielberg to do the movie and also was a consultant for all of this. So Close Encounters for me was really important. And of course, we've got Marc D'Antonio here, who works with Doug Trumbull, who is a special effects guru who was a part of Close Encounters. I've got to interview him. And I don't know, Close Encounters is just a very important part of my life. So it's always wonderful to be able to come here to Devils Tower and do these lectures.
When Spielberg's movie first came out, I was impressed with the fact that they were painting a picture of alien abductions and returns of people that were abducted. And not only that, the whole concept of a tower as a central focal point, like Devils Tower behind me, is a really, really interesting concept to me because we never actually had a show or a UFO movie of any kind that had a central focus that was so prestigious like this tower. And now the tower is like in pop culture, it's become an icon. And not only that, I think that the way they portrayed the aliens in the movie was very interesting. I've had the good fortune to work with the man who actually did the visual effects and special effects for that movie. I still work with him, and besides being a genius, a cinematic genius, he's also someone that actually had a good eye, and he's also a UFO hunter like me. So for him and for me, I think the question is very, very relevant because we want to try and find the answer. We want to know whether they're here. We want to know whether there's somebody out there. Of course we do. And so for me, the movie basically sets a framework and makes everything come into focus for me because now we're trying to build systems to locate these objects that may be coming into our space locally. And if that is something we can find, then we have what we call the smoking gun. And I think that's all we can ever ask for, is to try and find the smoking gun, to find the answer. And then to actually prove Spielberg right, that maybe aliens really are here and have been interacting with us for a long, long time.
Close Encounters is probably one of the more visible UFO-related films of the last century, and yet it somehow remained off of my radar, a lot like UFOs tend to do in general. But I mean, the premise of the story is pretty familiar to everybody. Dreyfuss' character, of course, sees an object he can't explain, and it changes his life, and it kind of makes him a bit of an outcast. I think a lot of people in the UFO community can sort of relate to that, even if you're a fairly boring UFO researcher like me who's never had an experience, which I think actually makes it more interesting for me because as a person who's never seen anything like that, and I try to follow in a journalistic way reports of encounters and try and get to the basis of the historical merit to these kinds of encounters and reports. There's a degree of separation and objectivity, I think, that I'm granted by not having had an experience like that myself. So I know a lot of people who I think can relate to that film, and even not having seen the film, it's something that as a UFO researcher, we all kind of work within that so-called paradigm. And it's a very interesting one because it remains much like Dreyfuss' character, I guess, kind of on the outskirts, if you will, of society. Although that's a little less the case since last December with some interesting reporting by the New York Times.
Well, when it came out in 1977, I was already in my 20s or closer to 30, and so going to see that movie was amazing. It affected me probably the way it affected most Americans or people around the world, because we get the sense that this might be kind of what the whole UFO thing really is about. You know, they come down, they seem friendly, but they take people away. I mean, it seemed to fit the pattern of UFOs that I had been reading about for many years, and I had already done a UFO documentary record called UFOs, The Credibility Factor. So I was already very involved with the UFO subject, and the whole Spielberg thing just really caught me by surprise, and I eventually met him a few months after his movie came out. And I got the feeling that, yes, he was very, very interested in showing this side of UFOs to the public.
The movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, to me, really typifies the human condition. It really touches on the emotional and psychological impact that these true close encounter cases have. And by that, I don't mean the distant lights in the sky that people report, but true close encounters of the first kind is defined by Hynek, very close encounters with unknown aerial objects that leave an indelible emotional and psychological impact on the witnesses. As a UFO historian, I quite often focus during lectures on dates, places, and names, but in the process, I think sometimes, and I include myself in this, we do a disservice to the eyewitnesses, because quite often these eyewitnesses that do have these experiences are in tears. They're emotionally distraught when we as investigators go and interview them. And I think the movie really encapsulates that with the character of Richard Dreyfuss. And you really see that dynamic play out with the character played by Terry Garr, Richard Dreyfuss's wife in the movie, where she didn't experience that UFO sighting. She didn't have that shared experience. And so she can sympathize with her husband, but she can't empathize. They didn't share that experience. So it's really the emotional component associated with true UFO sightings that I think that movie really exemplifies.